The new look of this overhauled Tucson might be what grabs your attention, but there's something else big happening here that you should know about too, and that's Hyundai's sales strategy. Let's say you want stuff like leather upholstery, ventilated front seats, and heated rear ones. None of that's unreasonable to ask for in a crossover like this one these days. Well, if that's the case, it's gotta be a hybrid. Now, before you get all up in arms, there's something else you should know. It's actually really good. Oh, and another thing, as far as how it drives, you wouldn't even know it was a hybrid in the first place. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. Hyundai's not the only automaker to take this approach to going gas electric. Over at Toyota, both the Sienna and the Venza are only available as hybrids these days. And you know, we do have reviews of both of those, so why don't you go ahead and queue those videos up so you can watch them next. Anyways, Hyundai decided not to stick a hybrid powertrain under every Tucson trim. So the two top trims, the luxury and this Ultimate that I'm driving, are the only ways to get a gas electric powertrain. And it's like I said off the top of the video, that means some pretty good stuff is unavailable with the gas engine on its own. There's another way to look at that as well, is that the hybrid isn't available with some lesser stuff that might cost just a little bit less if you're a little more budget conscious. But I think it's more important looking at it the other way. So it's not just leather, these heated and ventilated front seats, the heated rear ones. That stuff's all great, but that's not all that's covered with this whole hybrid at the top issue. Let's say you want this 10.25-inch touchscreen or Hyundai's blind spot monitoring system that uses cameras to give you a live look at what's happening on either side of you right here in the instrument cluster. Well, if you want that, you gotta step all the way up to this Ultimate trim that's at the top of the lineup, and it's $43.5 grand before tax. Now, that's a little bit less than you would pay for a Toyota RAV4 hybrid or a Ford Escape hybrid, but I'd argue that it feels like some of that money is going towards amenities in here that you can't get in either of those. Though there is one exception here. I really wish you could get a head-up display. And then there's something I just find awful, and it's all these touch controls for HVAC and audio. Now, I know Jody went off on them in her Santa Cruz video. And speaking of which, that's another one you should watch once you're done here. And let's be honest with each other, you may as well just subscribe at this point. But you know, we don't complain about that stuff just because we don't like them and prefer physical controls. It's that physical controls make way more sense. These ones take so much precision and patience to use. You're tapping down here at these sensors and you don't know whether you're actually hitting them or not, especially if you have your eyes on the road where they should be. Whereas if you reach down and adjust a little knob for volume or climate, yeah, that's easy because you can reach for it without even looking. I'll never understand why brands use systems like these, especially because this one doesn't look good either. Just take a look at it, all these fingerprints and dust. It takes about 5 minutes for it to get absolutely filthy. It is just awful. I don't know what Hyundai was thinking here. And you know, I get it. They're trying to be different, but I really do think they would be wise to go back to the way it was. Now, something else that's a little more minor, but it's still worth mentioning. If you do step up to this Ultimate trim for this 10.25-inch touchscreen, well, you're giving up the wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto connections that come with the 8-inch screen in the luxury trim. And for me, that's not such a big deal, but I know some of you technophiles out there might feel differently. The biggest issue for me is with this version I am driving specifically and how desperately it needs a software update. And that's usually not something I would complain about in a review unless it's really bad. But this is a prime example of why we need over-the-air updates in modern vehicles, because it's just basic stuff, but it is so frustrating to deal with. And I understand These rotate from one journalist to the next. There's not time to get them to the dealer in between, but that's the whole point. If there was an over-the-air update, it would take care of this. That's what happened with that Mercedes E-Class that I reviewed not too long ago, where I needed to get the smartphone app hooked up and it wouldn't work. So I started the OTA update while we were out shooting the video, and by the time we got to driving, the update was done and everything was good to go. That's what I'd like to see here. It's really weird stuff too. Take Google Maps. It won't recognize my voice, or at least it wouldn't all week long. It worked in the Bronco the last week, and it's worked in every other vehicle that I've driven recently. But then all of a sudden, this week when I picked this thing up, I couldn't tell it where to take me. It would say it wouldn't recognize my voice. Except for today, it just started working on its own. And then with voice to text, I can dictate messages just fine, and it'll read them back to me. But every time it does, it defaults to this muted FM radio station once I'm done. It's not even in my presets. It is so bizarre. I can't figure out what's going on, and I can pull up this list and see all these updates this thing needs. Again, give me OTA updates. Now, aside from those issues, I do really like this infotainment system, and it doesn't matter whether you're an iPhone person or an Android person, it's going to feel familiar because of these tile icons. The display is also nice and responsive too. Now, this 10.25-inch widescreen, well, it does work in either a full screen format, including with Apple CarPlay, or in a split screen setup. Now this one, it doesn't work in a split screen with Apple CarPlay, but I know some Hyundai products do, including that Elantra I reviewed earlier this year. And I also saw some confusion online about how to make that go away. Well, there are a couple different ways you can do it. First, in here, just hit this little arrow and it's gonna pull that third off to the side. But if you wanna make it go away permanently, hit these three lines, unselect split screen, and you are good to go. It is that easy before you are in business. Now, speaking of business, let's talk about the business end of this crossover, starting with the second row. It is so roomy back there. There's all kinds of space for the kids or whoever else you plan on shuttling around to stretch out, and the seats back there are heated too. There's about 3.5 inches more legroom in the back than the Toyota RAV4 Hybrid, which is significant, but it doesn't cut into front seat space or cargo room. There's actually more space in here on paper than there is in that Toyota, and with the second row seats folded down, I can fit my bike in here without even having to take the front wheel off. So where does the extra room in here come from compared to the RAV4? Because it's only about an inch longer from bumper to bumper, but more crucially, the wheelbase is 2.5 inches longer. And that means you're getting all kinds of extra usable space between the front and back wheels. That's where that rear seat legroom comes in especially. Now, if you need even more room than this, you can also get the Hyundai Santa Fe with the hybrid powertrain. But I would stick with the Tucson because it is just the better of the two to drive. They use the same drivetrain, but this one being smaller and lighter means the Tucson is the more nimble of the two. Honestly, the steering is perfect for a crossover like this, and the brakes feel nice and firm, and that's usually not a compliment I give to hybrids. They often feel really spongy and soft when you get on the brake pedal, but these ones are virtually perfect, and so is the ride quality. And I do have to say, back in the springtime, I tested the Tucson for a few days, and that one I drove, well, it only had about 600 kilometers on the odometer, and I found the ride to be really stiff and unrefined, but that is just not the case here. This one's got about 7,000 kilometers on the odometer, and it is perfectly broken in. Honestly, it is as comfortable as any of the premium SUVs I've driven lately, this side of ones with air suspension, and I would gladly cruise around in this thing all day long. So the ride is right, and so is the handling, but what about what gets this all moving? You know, Hyundai could have stuck with the typical hybrid approach, using a naturally aspirated four-cylinder with a couple liters of displacement and a continuously variable transmission, but it went in the opposite direction and absolutely nailed it. It is so unconventional, but it is fantastic. It's the 1.6-liter turbocharged four-cylinder that Hyundai and Kia will use in just about anything these days. And on its own, it makes 180 horsepower and 195 pound-feet of torque. And then paired to that is a 44.2 kilowatt electric motor, as well as a 1.49 kilowatt hour battery pack under the back seat. And then there's a 6-speed automatic transmission that works with the all-wheel drive system to get it all to the ground. And it is just so good. It doesn't drive like a hybrid at all. And that really is my biggest complaint about the RAV4 in particular. It's great, it's nice and efficient, but it just doesn't feel all that nice to drive. And it's not about an enjoyable drive. It's about it feeling strained and almost unnecessarily so. It really is because of that continuously variable transmission, but this being a properly geared automatic means you don't have any of those problems. I will admit, even if you look at the official spec sheets or you do it yourself, this isn't quite as efficient as either of those crossovers. This one's rated to burn about 6.4 liters per 100 kilometers combined, and those ones are right around 6. I think the Escape burns like 5.9 liters per 100 kilometers, but honestly, I think I would rather live with this for the way it drives because it is efficient, it is quiet, and it's smooth, but there's also all kinds of torque when you need it. That turbo motor is great, and having this transmission is perfect. We're coming up a little hill. I'm in eco mode. I give it some gas, and it's smooth, but it's peppy. That means merging and passing are not going to be a problem. Those can be pretty scary in that RAV4 hybrid. So I like that this thing kind of bridges the gap between a conventional crossover and a traditional hybrid. Honestly, after spending all week with this thing, I've realized you're just not leaving anything on the table with the Tucson hybrid. Whether you're talking about a hybrid like the RAV4 or the Escape, or a conventional crossover, there's all kinds of room inside. The ride quality is excellent. It's fairly efficient, and you can get it decked out with all kinds of good features, including Hyundai's Highway Drive Assist system. Now, you do have to keep your hands on the wheel, but it works with the adaptive cruise control, the lane keep assist, the cameras, the radar, all that stuff when you're out on the highway to take some of the stress out of the drive. It's not quite as smooth as the Nissan Rogues, which I would say is the best in the segment right now, but it's not too bad, and I don't mind using it. It feels pretty good. More importantly though, it means you're getting all kinds of value out of this thing, and it is my sleeper pick for the best in the segment. To recap, I like that the Tucson hybrid drives like a conventional crossover, that it's so spacious, and that the ride quality is excellent. I don't like that there's no head-up display, all the touch controls inside, or that there's no over-the-air updates. Look, the Toyota RAV4 is great at what it does, the Mazda CX-5 is nice to drive, and the Honda CR-V has all kinds of room inside. But what I like most about this new Tucson hybrid is that it takes all the best elements of those vehicles and combines them into one smooth, spacious, and efficient package.